As I'm recording this, I just realised I haven't plugged my lav mic in, so apologies if the audio is not as good as it normally is. I wasn't planning on making a video on this bike, but the more I look at it, the more I like it. And that bike is, of course, Harley-Davidson's new Nightster 975. So there's a couple of things straight off the bat that stick out to me, that I've learned. And number one is the fuel tank. Where in previous traditional Sportsters, you've got the fuel tank where the fuel tank normally is. In the case of the new Nightster 975, the fuel tank's actually under the seat, which is the same as my NC750X. But where the NC750X's fuel tank is sort of shaped in this sort of shape under the seat, the Nightster's fuel tank is vertical and runs straight from the seat to the bottom of the motorcycle. So all the weight that was previously atop the engine has now been moved down under the seat. And you can imagine as you're riding and the fuel is depleted, the centre of gravity actually gets lower and lower as you ride. So it's pretty clever, and I really like that. And I'm drawn to engineering tweaks like that, if you like. Just thinking a little bit outside the box. Now, I know it's not the first bike to have it done. Like I said, my NC750X has the tank under the seat. So it's been done on bikes for quite a while, but I really like the way they've implemented it in the new Nightster. The other thing I like about the bike is the way it looks. To me, this is a much nicer looking bike than the Sportster 1200. This looks like a Sportster, where the Sportster S, the 1250, is sort of a futuristic take on what the Sportster may evolve to one day. I really like what I'm seeing here with this Sportster. This looks like a Sportster. This looks like the next generation of the previous Sportsters. And by having the twin rear shocks, that frees up the space under the seat to have the fuel tank. Now, looking at the colours, it looks like there's going to be a black, a grey and a red option for the new Nightster 975. And interestingly, the red is limited to the tank. So on the red version, you've got a red tank, but the guards and the covers on the side are still black, which I don't mind. And the little bikini fairing is also black. So I think that looks pretty good. Personally, colour-wise, I'd probably go the black. I like black. But the grey's nice and the red's nice. And there again, every time I look at the bike and flick from colour to colour, it looks like a Sportster. So I think styling-wise, they've done a really nice job. The bars look wide when you look at the shot from the rear of the bike. Probably a little wider than I was expecting. That should provide for good input when you're steering the bike. Now, the other thing that I've been looking at is the ergonomics, rider position, and it looks like Harley have done what they typically do and put a shorter rider on the bike to make the bike look larger than it actually is. And I've seen them do this many times before. And in this shot here, I can see the rider standing beside the bike and the seat height of the bike. So the seat height unladen is 705 millimeters or 27.8 inches. So it's a pretty low seat height. And when you see this rider here standing beside the bike, I'd say his inside leg measurement would be around about 29 inches, maybe 30 at the most. So I reckon they are using a shorter rider for these press images, which in turn makes the bike look very comfortable. But I think if you dropped a 6'2" rider on there, you'd certainly get a different result. And what I will do is I'll put my Do I Fit riders on this bike, and you can see what a 5'3" to 6'4" rider will look on these bikes based on my projections. And I haven't seen that as I'm making this video. I haven't seen that myself, so it's going to be curious to see how they actually look. So you can see from this shot here, it looks like a very comfortable riding position for this height rider. Going back to the looks of the bike, I like the little bikini fairing they've put on the bike. I think it really suits it. I like that comes standard. It's not an optional extra by the looks. And I like the wheel design. I like the exhaust system design. It's tucked up out of the way. It's not sort of running across your leg as it is in the Sportster S. And again, from this angle, you can see that the bars look pretty wide. The rider's arms are out away from his body a fair bit. And again, this shot here, it's a very comfortable looking riding position. That's a riding position I would find ideal for myself on this bike, but that's not going to be the situation for me, I'm predicting. I like the little cutout in the fairing to let some air through to the rider. It's just probably more of a styling thing, but I do like the way that looks. Now let's have a look at some of the specifications. So the seat height, 27.8 inches or 705 millimeters. That's unladen. And they're saying that with the bike laden, it's 27.1 inches. So it's not even dropping an inch once you put some weight on it. That might be giving a hint to us of the suspension travel, or potentially lack thereof. Let's look at that right now, actually. Oh yeah, so suspension travel's 3 inches on the rear. I was probably going to guess 2 inches, so we've got 3 inches, that's an extra inch. And suspension travel on the front is 4.5 inches, so that's more than I was expecting. That's actually pretty good for this style of bike. Normally we're seeing around 2 inches in the Sportster S, the Indian Scout. They're around 2 inches in travel, so 3 inches is pretty good for this type of bike. I just want to look at the front brake disc diameter, 320 millimeters. That's the same as my bike, and I believe that's the same as the Sportster S. It's only a single rotor on the front, and that's a nice size. I find on my bike, which weighs around 219 kilograms wet. Let's see what the Nightster weighs in at. So weight in running order is 218 kilograms. So it's basically identical in weight to my NC750X. And comparing it to the Sportster S, it's about 10 kilograms lighter. So that's pretty good. At 219 kilograms, which is what my bike weighs, with that single 320 millimeter disc up front, the braking is completely fine. So I'm expecting the braking on this to be very good. And with the fuel tank being mounted under the seat, this is going to feel like a very light bike to ride, I predict, because when you walk up to the bike and pick it up off the stand, it's going to feel light. Yeah, I think it's going to be a very agile bike and a very nice bike to ride, weight-wise. Just curious to see what the wheel sizes are. So it's got a 19-inch wheel in the front and a 16-inch wheel in the rear. Fuel capacity is 11.7 litres or 3.1 gallons. I'm going to assume that's 3.1 US gallons. And the fuel economy is 4.5 litres per 100 kilometres or 52.4 miles per gallon. So that's going to work out around about 260 kilometres to empty on a tank, or about 162 miles. Horsepower, we're looking at 90 horsepower at 7,500 RPM. And torque is 70 foot-pound or 95 newton meters at 5,000 RPM. When you compare that to the Sportster S, you're looking at 121 horsepower at 7,500 RPM and 94 foot-pound at 6,000 RPM or 127 newton meters. You know, it's not that far down actually from the 1250. My bike's got around about 50 horsepower. The engine in this Nightster, even though the bike weighs the same as my NC750X, is going to feel a lot more powerful, given that the bikes are the same weight. And I'm only using the NC750X because that's what I ride daily. Like, I'm not saying you would cross-shop a Nightster with an NC750X. I'm just trying to get a feel mentally of what this thing's going to feel like to ride acceleration-wise. And it's going to feel pretty much twice as fast as my NC750X, as I'm predicting. The other thing I wanted to look at was the fork angle. That comes in at 28 degrees. And I think that's the same from memory as the Sportster S. Yeah, 28 degrees for the Sportster S as well. So I'm noticing in these official figures here from Harley-Davidson, from their press media announcement, they're not quoting any ground clearance figures. Yeah, no ground clearance figures there. Are they quoting ground clearance figures for the Sportster S? Yeah, so for the Sportster S, they're quoting 3.66 inches or 93 millimeters ground clearance, but there's no mention of ground clearance on the Nightster, which is interesting. So lean angle on the right is 32 degrees and lean angle on the left is 32 degrees. So that's pretty good. Compare that to the Sportster S, and we've got 34 degrees on either side for the Sportster S. So it's only 2 degrees less than the Sportster S, which reportedly has pretty good ground clearance for a bike of that type. So let's see if we've got any pricing here in Australia yet for the Nightster. Okay, so here we go. So the Nightster is starting at $23,995, so 24,000 Australian. Compare that to the Sportster S, which is 26,495 Australian, or $26,500. Just looking at the two bikes side by side, I definitely prefer the look of the Nightster over the Sportster S. I think it screams Harley-Davidson compared to the Sportster S. If it was my money, I'd be going for the Nightster. Now, having said that, you guys know me. When I see a bike like this and I look at the price, I automatically start thinking what else I could buy for 24,000 Australian dollars. You can buy a lot of bike for that money. For me, you'd really want to be a Harley-Davidson enthusiast to pay that sort of money, because if we look at the Rebel 1100, say for instance, so the Honda Rebel 1100, it starts at $19,989, so $19,900, I'll say $20,000. So it's $4,000 cheaper than the Nightster. If you go for the DCT version, you're looking at $21,120. So that's still $3,000 odd cheaper than the Nightster. You can buy a lot of bike for that money here in Australia. So looking at the weight of the two bikes, you've got 218 kilos for the Nightster and 223 kilos for the Rebel. So they're pretty well neck and neck. There's only 5 kilograms difference. That's for the manual version of the Rebel 1100. The Rebel 1100 has 87 horsepower, weighs 223 kilograms, and the Nightster has 90 horsepower, weighs 218 kilograms. So that's 5 kilograms less and 3 horsepower more. Now let's look at torque. So the Nightster's putting out 70 foot-pound of torque at 5,000 RPM, and the Honda is Newton meters. Let me convert that. So the Honda's putting out 72 foot-pound. So the Honda's producing its peak torque a little bit earlier, not by a lot. So acceleration-wise, the Nightster is going to be pretty similar to the Rebel 1100 in terms of the feeling of acceleration. Their weights are practically identical, their horsepower is practically identical, and the torque's practically identical. It's almost as if Harley have been targeting the performance characteristics of the Rebel 1100 for this bike. Now, price-wise, you're $4,000 more expensive for the Nightster, and that's going to be the Harley-Davidson tax, I suppose. That if you want the Harley with those figures, that's what you're going to have to pay. For me, I don't know. Styling-wise, you know what? I think I actually prefer the look of the Nightster over the Rebel 1100. So that's interesting. Whether it's $4,000 better looking or not. Okay, put it this way. If both bikes were the same price, I'd go to Nightster. That's interesting. If both bikes were the same price, I'd go the Nightster over the Rebel 1100. I just find the styling is more appealing to me. And I do like the Rebel 1100. So that's a bit of a feather in Harley-Davidson's cap. That's interesting. Let's go have a look through the images at some of the details. I like the indicator design, the LED indicators. The engine design, it's not a design I sort of, when I first saw it on the Sportster S or on the Pan America, I think on the Pan America it looks fine. On this sort of bike, I still want to see, I'd like to see fins. Would it stop me from buying the bike? No, I think it looks fine. It's just on a bike of this style, I just like to see fins. It's just a personal taste thing. The profile shot of the bike I think looks really nice. I like that. It looks like it's got a comfortable seat. I do like the air cleaner design. Just a very simple round air cleaner with 975 stamped on it or written on it. The rear shocks look fine. Nothing special, but I think it suits the bike, the having twin rear shocks on the back of it. This is a nice view from this three-quarter shot, from the rear three-quarter shot angle. Looks quite good. Yeah, styling-wise, I think Harley have done a really good job. I really like it. And of course, on the tank, you don't have a tank cap. You just have that inlay there, which I think works really well. And having that single gauge works as well for me. With that digital display inset into it, which gives you all information that you're going to need, like ride modes and gear position and probably tack as well. So yeah, all in all, I'm really liking the bike, and I'm liking it more than I thought I was going to like it. And I would buy this over the Sportster S. because for me, having 120 horsepower on a bike of this type is neither here nor there for me. 90 horsepower, it's not lacking. That's going to be plenty for this bike. So yeah, I think Harley have done a very good job. So to sum it up, I like it. I really like that what they've done with the fuel tank under the seat, airbox above the engine. I think that's clever. I think that's really nicely done. I like that. I like the styling. I like the features. It's missing things like cruise control, but at the end of the day, I think this bike, I was going to say, is more of a around town bar hopper, but with that 3 inches of suspension travel, I could see myself, and the seat design, I could see myself travelling further on this than the Sportster S. So I hope that cruise control becomes an option. Honestly, I think every bike should come standard with cruise control nowadays, especially at $24,000 Australian for this bike. I know the Rebel comes standard with cruise control, and that's $4,000 cheaper. So there's no reason why Harley-Davidson, if they're going to charge a premium price for this bike, it should have cruise control. So I think that's a cross instead of a tick. Other than that, I really like it. Fuel tank range 260 kilometres or 162 miles. I'd probably like a bigger tank, but it's not the end of the world. I think my Thruxton 900, after I did modifications, tuning and things like that, it was down just under 200. I was filling it up at around 180 to 190 kilometres. So 260, probably 260, you're probably going to want to leave 60 k's in reserve. So you're probably going to be filling up at around 200 kilometres in this anyway. As I mentioned in my member post, it's probably going to be 6 to 12 months before we get to see the bike here in Australia. Harley might surprise us and prove me wrong. I'm keen to test ride this bike, so if for some reason Harley-Davidson Australia gets to see this video, I'd love to test ride the Nightster. I think it's a pretty cool bike. Well, there you have it. At the time of recording this video, I haven't seen those renders yet, so let me know your feedback below. I'm curious to see how the 6-foot 1-inch rider is. That's what I am. And also how the 6-foot 4-inch rider fits. I know shorter riders are going to be able to reach the ground, no problems at all. I'd be surprised if the 5-foot 3-inch rider couldn't reach the ground. Yeah, so I'm curious to see what you think of those renderings. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching today. And as always, thank you so much for your support. And hopefully I can get to see you all again in the next one. Bye for now.